we can consider the pursuit of pleasure in two broad senses, one which might be called lower and the other which might be called higher, although I'm not very happy with that classification. There is the pursuit of material pleasure, an art very much neglected in this day and age, because it must be carefully distinguished from the pursuit of theoretical pleasure. The pursuit of material pleasure is an art requiring a difficult discipline, much devotion and much skill. And it ranges through all the activities of man: engineering, cookery, clothes, architecture, lovemaking, and the so-called fine arts, music, literature, painting, sculpture, and so forth. But we are living in a culture where the pursuit of material pleasure is, as I say, neglected, in pursuit of a symbolic pleasure, which, of course, like many religions, has its prayer mat. Because a monetary unit is, of course, useful in exactly the same way that inches and hours, days, months, pounds, grams, and other units of measure are useful. But nobody has yet made a claim to fame by collecting inches. I have more inches than you. Because it is not a matter of social agreement that the possession of inches represents the possession of wealth. It is a matter of social agreement, and this is the only validity for money having any value whatsoever, is that everybody agrees that the chips are worth so much. And money is exactly like poker chips, except there's an agreement between all of us that we will accept them in lieu of goods and services. But goods and services constitute real wealth. And we are living in a society where we eat the menu instead of the dinner, because we are more interested in accumulating the tokens of wealth than wealth. And this flows over from symbols such as money itself into many other dimensions of life, because we tend on the whole to confuse symbol with reality. The idea that this world that we see with our five senses is a material world is merely an idea. Materialism as a philosophy of nature, dialectical materialism, naturalistic materialism, is a point of view. It's a concept. It's a very, very highly abstract notion. So equally is the notion that this world that we see with our five senses is basically mental or spiritual. That also is a concept. The actual world is neither spiritual nor material. There is no way of saying what it is, because it is, like mystical experience, ineffable. It cannot be effed or spoken, from the Greek pheme, to say. So that world, which is neither spiritual nor material, is the neglected world. Most people think of it as material, but it's very much overlooked. Symbols are substituted for it. That is to say, we have symbolic goods. People live in symbolic homes, drive symbolic automobiles, wear symbolic clothes, which are valued for what they cost rather than for their quality. And this is, of course, as I've insisted, perhaps ad nauseam, especially manifested in what we eat. Our standards of cooking are improving, thanks to Gourmet magazine and a few redoubtable people on the radio like Julia Childs. But by and large, the food of even wealthy people is disgraceful. It is symbolized by bread, which is supposed to be our staff of life, and we eat nothing but a kind of consumable styrofoam, fortified with vitamins, and you can read the list of them on the wrapper as if it were medicine. Also, in the pursuit of pleasure in the form of the fine arts, we don't really enjoy it. An enormous number of reasonably affluent people who attend concerts and go to exhibitions of paintings go there because they think they're improving their minds. That in some way doing things like that is good for you. People go to church for the same reason. That's the last reason for going to church, because it's good for you. That is an absolutely morbid interest, because it distracts you from what is going on. If you listen to Bach because you think it's good for you, you're not listening. In order to listen to Bach, you have to swing with it. And then you forget all about whether it's good for you or not. In fact, it feels more like things that are bad for you. When you swing with Bach, it begins to feel like sex. And as everybody knows, that's terribly bad for you. So I'm not going to dwell at any very great length on the niceties and the disciplines of the pursuit of pleasure in that so-called lower sense. I only want to say in passing that if you don't have the realization that the pursuit of material pleasure requires a certain degree of asceticism, you won't be able to pursue any other or higher kind of pleasure. Because asceticism is not unpleasant. Asceticism is like an olive between wines. It cleanses the palate. And what's the matter with olives? It is like taking some sort of exercise, which can be very pleasurable indeed, provided you don't do it grimly. There is a dreadful exercise being used today called jogging, which has absolutely nothing to recommend it. Because to begin with, when I watch people jogging, they obviously show they don't know how to run. They're running mostly on their heels. And that jars the bones all the way through and upsets the vertebral discs and so on. And there's a certain grim determination about joggers. They tend to run in straight lines, which they believe to be the shortest distance between 2 points. Now, a straight line is not the shortest distance between 2 points on Earth, because Earth is wiggly. It is not a flat surface, except by courtesy of bulldozers and occasional freaks of nature. This world, as I keep repeating, is a fundamentally wiggly phenomenon. But wherever human beings have been around, you will see they have a passion for Euclideanism. Everything is ruled out in straight lines and put in boxes, and grid patterns of streets are laid across the surface of the earth. And that tells you human beings have been there. Why this passion for Euclidean order? Because Mr. Euclid had a very, very simple mind and tended to think in these rather uninteresting shapes instead of in curvaceous wiggles. Now, nobody would fall in love with a Euclidean woman. What we appreciate about women is their curvaceousness, their wiggliness. And wiggliness offends some people because they are not sure of it. They can't figure it out. You never know quite what it's going to do next. That's why people often don't like snakes, because a snake is the great symbol of wiggly vitality, of undulation, of waves. And all this world is fundamentally a system of wave vibrations. And if you cannot wave with it, if you are rigid, you will always be resisting life. So wiggliness and going with wiggliness, in other words, do you swing, is fundamental. to the pleasure of life. But you see, where we think that order and getting things in order is getting them squared away, we're always saying, let's get it squared away. Let's get it straight. And so there are certain kinds of people who are called straights and squares who do not swing. And as a result of that, they are out of harmony with a wiggly universe. And their attitudes range from cookery at one end to religion at the other. Because a square religion is one that is too abstract, that resists the flow element of life. It wants a canal instead of a river. And it conceives heaven as a city rather than a rose garden. Paradise is a garden. And all the trouble began when people substituted the heavenly city for the paradise garden. When, in other words, popes began to be called urban and unbelievers were called pagan, because a paganus is a country dweller, a man of the wiggles, as distinct from a man of the streets. A liver under the sky instead of one who lives in a box. Because the box, you see, is the great symbol of classification. What box are you in? All words are labels on intellectual boxes. Is it animal? Is it vegetable? Is it mineral? 3 boxes. Is it solid or is it a gas? Is it Republican or is it Democrat? Is it capitalist or is it communist? Is it Christian or is it heathen? Is it male or is it female? All boxes. And so because we think in boxes, we live in boxes, all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same. And whereas certain kinds of fish live in beautiful shells, glorious spirally wiggles on them and lovely colors. But we tend to want everything straightened out, you see. And that rigidity is always in a fight with the surrounding fluidity. And so we are, as it were, landlubbers rather than men of the waves. And the British have always made a great thing about this because they've always associated freedom with the ocean. Who are so free as the sons of the waves, and Britons never, never, never shall be slaves because of this seamanship. Now, we think, you see, of the sea as fluid and the land as solid. And nothing could be further from the truth, as you've all experienced recently in Southern California. The earth is not very solid. It flows. Where I live, in Sausalito, we have along the waterfront a lot of land that has been reclaimed. And not so long ago, they built a marina quite close to us, where they dredged out mud to make the marina, not realizing that land is liquid. Therefore, the land adjoining the water is sinking to fill up the hole made by excavating for the marina. People just don't think of things like that because they think of land as solid. And so in religion, we are seemingly looking for solids, for something upon which I can take my stand, for a firm foundation, for the rock of ages, or even, poor old Paul Tillich, for the ground of being. But we are not living in that sort of universe. We're living in a fluid universe, in which the art of faith is not in taking one's stand, but in learning to swim. You don't cling to, you don't try to stand on water. By breathing and by a certain relaxation, you learn to trust the water to support you. This is even more true in flying in the air, gliding especially, or in sailing. In all those arts, there is an adaptation to the fluid. And that is the major thing that we have to learn if we want to survive as a species and survive happily. Nobody wants just to go on. One wants to go on in an elegant way. And even that passion for survival is something against pleasure, because nothing ruins pleasure more than the anxiety to go on having it. More, more, more. Because that shows, when you ask for more, 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 and have the anxiety to go on, that you're not having it now. You always think it's coming. That you want jam tomorrow is more pleasing than jam today. And if we say of something that is useless, it has no future, that's the most awful thing you can say about it. I would rather say of something that's no good, it has no present. Not that it has no future. Because the future is merely a promise, in the same way as this symbol is merely a promise to pay. Promises, promises, promises. So, therefore, it is fundamental to pleasure that one learns to wiggle and not be stiff and rigid. As we would say, let go. Relax. That doesn't mean become droopy. Relax means to become supple. It also means to learn the strength of your weight, how to use weight, how to flow with gravity. Water, for example, always flows with gravity, and it wiggles. It takes the course of least resistance, and yet has tremendous strength. But we, in our white Anglo-Saxon Protestant ethical system, not to mention our Irish Catholic one, which is really the same thing, only a little bit more fancy and dressed up in lace, is to take the line of least resistance is considered cowardly and despicable. Go straight, kaflooing, right through, with a bulldozer ahead. Why go straight? Well, you've got to get there. Fastest way, shortest distance between 2 points. And I get back to jogging. That is not the right way to run. The right way to run is to dance. To dance across the countryside. And anyone who dances across the countryside will outwit and outtime the jogger. I don't know if any of you witnessed the World Cup in soccer last year on television. It was won by the Brazilian team. And I have never seen such soccer. That's not the way they taught us to play it in school. As the sports writer in the London Times put it, they danced their way to victory. Because the whole thing was like very fine basketball, where instead of being this sort of tough pushing to victory, they were lilting with the ball, and the most incredible teamwork of subtle passing, bouncing it off almost any part of the body with the capacity to give it direction, with one's back, with one's shoulder, with one's hip, anything, head. It was a beautiful art and a magnificent spectacle. But you see, we are not taught to do things that way, because we are taught that life is serious and therefore must be done in an efficient way, but according to Euclidean ideas of efficiency. In ancient times, when people worked, they used to sing. Hardly anybody sings anymore, except at a performance of some kind or something like that. Imagine a bank teller singing as they were counting out the money. Oh, the king was in his counting house, counting out the money, 5, 10, and 20, 30, 40, 50, you know. Why not? What would happen if you were confronted by a singing bank teller? You would complain to the management and say, this is money, it's very serious. You could sing about it, everything will go wrong. Can you imagine a stockbroker's working song? I have seen people. I once had my shoe shined in a New York subway. That was a most extraordinary performance. You know? And he was swinging. And imagine, supposing you were a bus driver. You know, most people, when they drive a bus and through city traffic, they are cursing and swearing and being angry and fighting the clock all the way through town. Well, that's a disaster. But imagine driving a bus with the idea that going from here to there, the point wasn't to get there, but the point was to go. And dancing that bus through the streets with a very, very skillfully accurate traffic dodging. And when you get to a stoplight and there's a jam, you play a little tune on the horn. Or you pass jokes to the cab driver near you. Or you play with the passengers. See, anything can be turned into juggling, into playing with balls. That's why we say have a ball. So this bus driver is swinging through the streets. And he prides himself in the marvel of his terpsichorean art. But people don't do that. Because work is not supposed to be pleasant. Because you get paid for it. You're not supposed to get paid for enjoying yourself. See, that's what I do. Because I think I'm smart. I talk to you not because I think I'm doing you any good, but because I like talking about these things. And if you pay me for it, then I make my living. As simple as that. So I'm a sort of philosophical entertainer. But that's the point, that the transformation of work is swinging it. And the curse of work that came in the story of Genesis, you see, work became a curse because the tree of knowledge was the knowledge not of good and evil in the ordinary sense, but of the advantageous and the disadvantageous. The words in Hebrew refer to the art of metallurgy. That's where the trouble begins. When we use technology to get there fast, and the faster we get there, the less worth is the place of arrival. Because you've eliminated the distance between. And that's what makes the difference between here and there. The distance. If you take it away, then there is the same as here. So there was no point going there. There's no point going from here to Honolulu. None whatever. It's the same place, to all intents and purposes. Certainly no point in going from Los Angeles to Tokyo. I mean, there are a few nice little bars in Tokyo where you can get sushi. But you can get them in Los Angeles now, because Tokyo's come to Los Angeles. It's practically the same place. And both have the same smog. The police in Tokyo wear gas masks when they're directing traffic. You know, crazy. Is this wealth? To have a $150,000 house in Beverly Hills and live in poison gas? Crazy. That's wealth.